This game was played in 1980 by then world chess champion Anatoly Karpov against England's first grandmaster, Tony Miles, who I think was one of the most creative players in history and certainly the funniest player. Karpov opens with pawn to e4, and Miles responds with a6. This is a move that a complete beginner might make. And I looked at the database, and it only shows about 5 games were played before 1980, compared to like 150,000 games with almost any other normal opening move, e5 or c5. So Karpov certainly was out of the book and had to think for himself and use principles to guide his play and calculation, of course. I mean, a6 violates every opening principle every chess player learns. Does nothing to occupy the center, doesn't develop a piece. So Karpov grabs the center with pawn to d4. He was probably thinking, how dare this guy play such schlock against me? I'm going to cream him. And Miles plays pawn to b5. In his book, he says that he heard chuckling going on in the room after b5. I love this game because it shows how even a world champion can overestimate his position, rush his attack, not look at his opponent's threats. The same thing you or I and every other chess player has done in their games and paid the price. So let's see where and how Karpov goes wrong. Miles follows up with b5. So he's giving Karpov the center, and he's trying to get his queenside development. But this looks so funny. But chess is a game of compensation. You can't have it all. With every move you gain and you lose something. Karpov develops his knight to f3, and Miles develops his bishop, attacking this undefended pawn. Karpov plays bishop to d3, defending the pawn. Knight to f6, hitting the pawn again. And the queen defends. 2 defenders, 2 attackers. If white advances this pawn, it opens up the bishop on the long diagonal. Miles plays e6, opening up the bishop. And Karpov immediately hits the queenside pawns. And black, in turn, hits the center pawns. Pawn to c5. Each side is hitting away at their opponent's spatial advantage. Karpov takes, black recaptures, and the knight develops to d2. He's supporting the e4 pawn again. It almost looks like that white can win a pawn here, but this pawn would be hanging if the bishop were to immediately recapture here, if black recaptured it this way. And not only that, but white wants to win the game. The early simplification and trades without some kind of an advantage can lead the game towards more of a drawish position. And now black pushes the pawn to b4 and taking away the chances for a trade on b5. And now that this knight is developed, he pushes the pawn, the knight runs. Now white has a nice spatial advantage here on the king side and has removed the defender of the king. And now white slides the knight in, attacking the undefended bishop. Possibilities for checks here. Maybe some later sacrifices on f6. The bishop runs. White castles. The knight develops, hitting the pawn, defending this pawn. Bishop develops, hitting this pawn. And the queen develops, and we got 2 attackers on this pawn, 1 defender. White plays a Chicago way move here. The little guy harassing big guy, hitting the knight. And black takes en passant. And the knight captures, which reveals a discovered defense of this pawn. Now we've got 2 defenders on it. And now the white knight is threatening to capture this knight and mess up white's pawns here. So black captures the knight and bishop takes. Now also this bishop, you see, is hitting its own pawn, so its mobility is a little restricted here. And at the professional level, black is often happy to draw since he has a disadvantage right out of the opening. So trading down without conceding anything in time, space, or force, or pawn structure isn't dangerous. And I also think that knight would be a little pesky later on with this problem with this hole right here. And let's back up a little bit. And the black knight here, it doesn't really have any good squares to go to as well. So capturing makes the most sense. And now black goes and harasses this light squared bishop, so white captures it. I'm guessing his reasoning is that this is white's bad bishop since it was hitting on this pawn, so he wants to trade it off. And also white's knight could have gotten pesky by jumping into d5 here too at some point. So he trades it off and black takes. And now the rook grabs the open file, attacking the queen. And the queen slides into safety here on b6, defending this pawn, not allowing the rook to come down here, defending the bishop. And now white plays bishop to e4, and now white plays bishop to e4, putting a question to the b7 bishop. This is black's best piece right now. If black captures the bishop, the queen can recapture, attacking this bishop and then putting pressure on this pawn. And the knight and queen working together can be a threat over here on the king side, because black is lacking a piece over there to protect him, where the knight usually belongs here. And this rook is already active, and he could get an attack going on the king side. So black castles, and now the knight slides in, attacking this pawn twice. The pawn advances, and now Karpov makes a nice little interesting maneuver here. He checks the king runs. Now the bishop slides all the way back with the potential for the queen-bishop battery with a mating attack here on h7. Looks pretty scary to me. Okay, so what would you do as black here? Why don't you pause the video, come up with a plan, a defense. Okay, taking the knight doesn't work. Queen check, checkmate with the bishop and queen battery here. So black slides the bishop here, attacking the knight, actually threatening to win it now, since we won't have to open up this H file. And the knight runs, which gives black time to go to the open file with his rook, something you learn in most chess books. Grab open files with rooks. And now the queen sets up this very scary battery, threatening mate here. There's one interesting feature to notice, though. The king is here on h8, which means the knight doesn't have an immediate check on the king. So it's actually going to take 2 moves to threaten that mate. And that's a critical difference. Analyze the position right now, pause the video, and think of what you would do as black here. Look at all the power move weaknesses. If you haven't watched the video on tactics, go look at that where I explain all the 6 power moves. Okay. Did you notice this undefended pawn here? And actually black can set up an additional power move as well. He plays rook takes rook, rook takes. You see, because there's no check here. And now queen grabs the pawn, attacking this undefended rook. White doesn't have time to go after this mate right now, because the queen takes rook is check. And the queen would have to slide back. And white would be down a rook and game over. So the rook has to move and stay on the back rank to prevent these checks, potential checks. If the queen goes back to defend, we might have a trade of queens, and then white's mating attack is gone. So it looks like Karpov just made a mistake here and overestimated the power of this battery. So the rook runs, and now the queen actually picks up this pawn here. Now black's up 2 pawns. It's because this knight doesn't have a check, which changes everything. And it's pinned. The rook is undefended here. Now white recaptures one of the pawns, hitting both bishops. But pause the video. What would you do as black here? Look at all the power moves. Okay, he plays bishop attacks rook, undefended rook. Rook runs. Okay, now pause the video again and think of the best move for black. If black can go into an endgame, he'll win the game. He's up 2 pawns. It'll be a technical win. So black's goal now, when you're up material, is to try and force trades. And the move to do that with is queen here. Offering the exchange of queens. If the queen runs, we have mate here. So it's forcing the queen to trade. Queen takes, bishop takes, and black is completely winning now. So we'll end this game here. You can look it up online in different databases. I usually go to chessgames.com. You can find Karpov versus Miles, and you'll find this game. So Karpov overestimated his position, thought he had a mating attack, but he was behind by one move, and then probably just didn't see this threat here on the pawn with undefended pieces, which gave black the initiative and allowed him to force trades. This game also shows how difficult it is to punish violations of opening principle. It's never automatic. You've got to play tough, calculate, look at all the threats, and not rush. I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it, and I'll be putting up some games soon where Magnus Carlsen plays some B and C players and experts. They're very instructive. So talk to you later.